He always thought $5 could only buy him a stale loaf of bread or a cracked second-hand mug. Not a whole house, and certainly not a moment that would make his breath freeze harder than any mountain wind. But life on the ridge had a way of saving its strangest surprises for boys who'd already run out of reasonable things to expect. The notice had been taped crookedly in the dusty window of the town office, fluttering in the draft whenever someone opened the door. A small square of paper with fading ink that most people glanced at and forgot. Tax delinquent property, abandoned mountain cabin, starting bid $5. That was all. No photos, no description, just a scribbled parcel number and a date. Most of the valley folk laughed when they saw it. Some shook their heads at the idea of anyone bothering with a rotted shack up on the north side, especially for a winter like this one, with the first snow already licking at the peaks. But when Liam stopped in front of the window, hands jammed deep in his threadbare jacket, the letters on that scrap of paper seemed to lean toward him like they were whispering his name. $5. The exact amount folded in his pocket, the last of what he'd earned hauling boxes behind the grocery store and splitting wood in yards that weren't his. $5 between him and an empty night, or between him and something else entirely. You're not seriously thinking about it? Sam murmured at his side, brown ears perked under the dirt-colored fur, breath clouding the glass. The dog didn't speak, of course. The voice lived only in Liam's head, a quiet habit he'd picked up after too many days, alone on the mountain. But the look in Sam's eyes said enough. Don't be stupid. Liam stared at the notice a long time anyway. He thought of the lean-to, half-sunk in snow where he and Sam had been sleeping, of the way the tarps snapped in the wind at night and let in a slow trickle of cold that even a doubled blanket couldn't keep out. He thought of the valley kids who had houses with chimneys and doors that shut properly, and adults who might complain about the heating bill, but still had one. He thought of his grandmother's old cabin on the South Ridge, the one that had burned when he was 10, taking her and every photograph he'd ever known down into one pile of blackened wood and ash. Since then, he'd moved from corner to corner, half welcome in other people's homes until they grew tired of the extra mouth, equally half welcome in town jobs that never lasted long enough to become real. The mountain had been the only constant. That and Sam. $5, he thought. The number echoed around in his skull like a stone bouncing off canyon walls, smaller and smaller, but still there. When the auction hour came, the town hall was almost empty. Just the clerk with the thinning hair, an older woman with a knitting bag, and Liam sitting in the back row, trying to look like he belonged there, and not like a boy who'd sneaked in from the cold. Sam waited outside, tied loosely to the rail, eyes tracking the door. The auction lasted less than 10 minutes. A couple of lots of rusting equipment went for barely more than scrap. Then the clerk cleared his throat and read out the parcel number from the notice in the window. Abandoned structure on the north slope. Old ranger's cabin, boarded for 6 years, no road access in winter. His tone suggested no one was expected to care. Starting bid, $5. Silence stretched. The knitting needles clicked once, twice. Someone coughed in the hall outside. Liam's heart hammered in his ears. This was ridiculous. He had no truck, no family, no money for firewood beyond what he could cut himself. No guarantee the cabin even had 4 standing walls. But he had $5 and nowhere that truly belonged to him, and a mountain that sometimes felt like it was listening when he spoke. His hand rose before his brain could catch up. 5, he said, voice cracking slightly. The clerk looked up, surprised, eyes sweeping the empty room just to be sure no one else had spoken. 5 going once, he intoned, glancing at the woman with the yarn. She shook her head, amused. Going twice? Liam held his breath. Sold, to the young man in the back. The stamp came down on the paper with a dull, final thud. That was it. No fanfare, no congratulations. Just a faded receipt and a key that felt too small for what it promised. Liam walked out of the hall with the paper crumpled in his fist, the weight of the key like a cold coin in his pocket. Sam met him at the rail, tail thumping cautiously. Well? His eyes asked. Liam crouched, burying his face for a moment in the dog's warm neck, breathing in the smell of fur and earth and smoke. We bought a house, he whispered, half in awe, half in disbelief. For $5. If Sam could have rolled his eyes, he would have. The climb up to the north slope started as a narrow logging trail, half covered in frost, winding through bare aspens and dark firs. The clouds hung low over the peaks, heavy with unfallen snow. Liam's breath fogged in the air with each step, his worn boots slipping on patches of ice. Sam trotted ahead, then circled back, leaving looping prints in the thin layer of powder. The key in Liam's pocket knocked against his thigh with each movement, a quiet reminder. You own something now. Or maybe it owns you. As they gained altitude, the town shrank behind them into a scatter of rooftops and faint chimney smoke, already softened by distance. Up here, the air tasted sharper, cleaner, and the wind carried only the smell of pine and old stone, and beneath that, something else, an almost metallic tang he couldn't quite name. The clerk's hastily sketched map said the cabin sat near an old ranger trail, left from a time when people still patrolled these parts for fires and lost hikers. Those patrols stopped after a budget cut and a bad winter, and the cabin had been shuttered and forgotten. If it hasn't fallen down yet, it soon will. The clerk had muttered as he handed Liam the key, coverall cynicism hiding the fact that he was mildly impressed anyone wanted it. Watch the storms up there. Snow comes sideways. Liam had nodded, but storms didn't worry him much. He'd been weathering a different kind of storm for years, the sort that wakes you in the night with the certainty that the world has moved on without you. Trees thickened around them as they climbed, trunks dark and close. A crow flapped overhead, its call a sudden harsh note that made Sam bristle. Liam kept walking, following the faint indent of the trail until it curved around a jut of rock and opened into a small clearing half hidden by pines. There, hunched against the slope like something trying to keep warm, stood the cabin. At first glance, it looked like every story he'd ever heard about it might be true. The roof sagged in the middle, shingles missing in scabbed patches. One shutter hung crooked on a single hinge, banging weakly when the wind caught it. The front steps were broken, the bottom one missing entirely, leaving a muddy gap. Snow lay in small drifts against the lower logs, as if testing the structure before committing to burying it. But it was real, and it was his. Liam stopped at the edge of the clearing, chest tight. The place gave off a feeling he couldn't quite name. Not welcoming, not hostile, but watchful, as if it had been alone for so long it didn't remember how to behave around people. Sam stood beside him, ears forward, tail low. "Looks better than the lean-to," Liam said under his breath, because sometimes if you made light of things, they didn't feel so enormous. The dog flicked an ear, unconvinced. They crossed the clearing slowly. Up close, the cabin's age showed in every warped plank and split board. Moss grew between the logs, a green line tracing years of rain. The front door was boarded, 2 planks nailed diagonally across it in an X, though one nail had rusted loose, leaving the top boards slightly ajar. A faded official sign still clung to the wood near the frame. "Condemned," it declared in cracked red letters. Liam touched the edge of the board and felt a splinter bite into his skin. "Not anymore," he murmured. "You're condemned to us now." He dug the key from his pocket, turning it over in his palm. It was surprisingly new-looking compared to the cabin, a later replacement for a lock that probably hadn't seen use in years. The thought made him uneasy. If the cabin had been shut for so long, who had needed a new key? And why had it been lying ready for the clerk to hand over? He pushed the questions away, one mystery at a time. He pried the loose board off with effort, nails squealing. Then the second. The sound echoed across the clearing, startling a small avalanche of snow from a nearby branch. The door beneath the boards was solid, dark, and cold to the touch. The key slipped into the lock with a soft metal scrape, then turned with more ease than it had any right to. The bolt slid back. The door exhaled a breath of stale, trapped air as it opened. Sam pressed close to Liam's leg. The boy stepped inside, squinting as his eyes adjusted from the washed-out brightness outside to the shadowed interior. The cabin smelled of dust, old smoke, and something else. Faint, sharp, like cold stone after rain. Light slanted through gaps in the shutters, cutting the darkness into strips. The main room was small but intact. A stone hearth on one wall, an overturned chair, a toppled shelf with a few glass jars still clinging to it. Someone had left in a hurry. Or maybe not at all. Cobwebs stitched corners together. The floor creaked under his weight, but held. Liam moved slowly, taking in every detail. The cracked enamel sink, the iron hooks near the door, the shelf over the hearth, where a ring of lighter wood suggested some frame or clock had once hung. His throat tightened with something like grief, though he didn't know for whom. "Not so bad," he whispered. "Could be worse." Sam paced the perimeter, sniffing every corner, tail flicking with cautious curiosity. Then, just as Liam's shoulders began to loosen, the dog froze. Every muscle went rigid. His hackles rose. A low growl started deep in his chest, vibrating against the stillness of the cabin. Liam turned sharply. "What is it?" Sam's gaze pointed toward a narrow hallway at the back of the room, where 2 doors stood half open, their darkness thicker than the shadows elsewhere. The air there seemed colder, heavier. Liam swallowed, the sound loud in his own ears. "Probably just mice," he muttered, though Sam's reaction said otherwise. He looked down at the dog. "Stay," he said softly. Sam didn't like it, but he held his ground, muscles quivering. Liam stepped toward the hallway, each floorboard protesting. The first door opened into what had once been a small bedroom. Bare mattress frame, broken dresser, a window with a cracked pane. Empty. Dust motes drifted in the faint light. He turned to the second door. This one was almost completely closed, only a thin line of darkness showing along the edge. A draft slid through the gap, carrying with it a smell that didn't belong in an abandoned cabin. Sharp, wild, clean in a way that cut through the dust and old wood. The hair on Liam's arms prickled. Behind him, Sam's growl deepened into something strangled and urgent. But he didn't bark, didn't lunge. Fear held him silent. Liam's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. It was cold, colder than the air around it, as if something on the other side drank warmth. For a heartbeat, he thought about turning around, about boarding the door back up, about pretending he'd never seen the ad in the town office window. But he had nowhere else, no other walls to stand inside when the wind tore across the ridge. Whatever this cabin held, it was part of the bargain his $5 had bought. It's just a room, he whispered to himself. Just a room. He turned the knob and pushed. The door swung inward with a soft sigh. The room beyond was darker than the rest of the cabin, its single window completely blocked by snow piled high against the outside wall. The only light came from the crack behind Liam and the faint glow seeping under the door from the main room. He took a cautious step forward. The smell grew stronger. Not rot, not mildew. Something like cold air off high rocks mixed with the faint musk of fur. His eyes adjusted slowly. Shapes emerged from the black. A low cot along one wall, a metal trunk, a tangle of blankets in the far corner, like someone had dragged them there to make a nest on the floor. And in that nest, 2 small pinpoints of silver light opened. Eyes. Watching him. The rest of the shape followed an instant later as Liam's brain scrambled to make sense of what he was seeing. A head lifted from the blankets, slow and fluid, ears flattening briefly against a skull patterned in shadowed gray and white. A long body unwound itself, muscles rippling under a thick coat speckled with rosettes of darker fur that seemed to swallow what little light there was. A tail, impossibly long and thick, dragged across the boards with a whisper, like silk on stone. The creature stood fully now, poised, silent, its shoulders nearly level with Liam's chest. It was slender and powerful, built for cliffs and snow and high places where humans rarely went. Its eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the thin line of light from the doorway, turning them into 2 fragments of frozen moon. Liam's body locked. His fingers went numb. His breath forgot how to move. Every story he'd ever heard about these ghosts of the mountains. How they were nearly impossible to see. How they vanished long before you could get close. How people in the valley weren't even sure they still existed. All those stories collided with the impossible fact that one was standing not 10 feet away from him, inside the cabin he just bought for $5. A snow leopard, here, in the dark, between him and the corner, its body a perfect blend of shadow and pale fur, taut with readiness. Sam whimpered from the main room, claws scraping lightly against the floor as if torn between running and rushing in. The leopard's head turned slightly at the sound, ears twitching, then returned its gaze to Liam. Not crouched to spring, not bared teeth, just watching, measuring, the way predators did when deciding whether something in front of them was threat, prey, or something stranger. Liam's legs trembled so hard he thought he might drop to his knees. He wanted to shout, to back away, to slam the door, and pretend this was all a hallucination, born from thin air and thinner meals. But his body stayed rooted, eyes locked with the animals. The cabin seemed to shrink around them until there was nothing left in the world but the boy, the cat, the thin slice of light between them. and the cold breath of the mountain pressing against the logs from the outside. "Easy," he mouthed, though no sound came. The leopard tilted its head, ears flicking. It took one slow step forward, the movement so smooth it was almost invisible until its paw touched the floor. Soft, heavy, silent. Liam's heart slammed so hard it hurt. He realized, in that razor-edged moment, that he stood exactly where he'd always feared he would one day find himself, on the threshold between having nothing and having everything to lose. His $5 cabin wasn't empty. It held something rare and dangerous and beautiful, something that shouldn't have been here at all. And as the snow leopard's eyes pinned him in place, Liam understood that whatever had brought it to this deserted place high on the mountain had tangled its story with his in a way he didn't yet understand. He had gone looking for shelter. Instead, he had opened a door and walked straight into the wild heart of the mountain itself. Liam stood frozen in the doorway, breath caught high in his chest as the snow leopard's eyes followed every tremor of his hands, every tiny rise and fall of his ribs. The silence between them stretched tight, like the moment before an avalanche breaks loose. The cat didn't move at first, only blinked once, with a slow, deliberate calm that made Liam's pulse thunder, even louder in his ears. Sam whimpered again from the other room, claws scraping the floor as if he wanted to rush in and protect his boy, but knew instinctively that one wrong movement could end everything. The leopard shifted, stepping into the narrow shaft of light from the hall, just one step, but it was enough for Liam to see the long scars hidden in its fur, thin, pale lines across its shoulder and flank, old wounds that told a story he didn't know yet. The cat wasn't here by accident. It wasn't some wandering ghost of the peaks that had just slipped inside for warmth. There was intention in the way it stood, tension coiled in its body, but not pointed toward him, as if it were waiting for his reaction rather than preparing its own. Liam swallowed, feeling the cold knob of fear settle in his gut. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered, barely audible even to himself. But the leopard heard. Its ears twitched, head tilting just slightly, eyes narrowing in a way that made it look almost curious. Liam took a slow, shaky breath and eased one foot backward, the floor creaking under his weight. The cat didn't lunge, didn't growl. It only watched him with the intense stillness of something accustomed to mountains, cliffs, storms, things far more dangerous than a skinny boy, with a worn jacket and a $5 deed in his pocket. Another step back. Light shifted across the leopard's face, revealing more scars, more stories carved into its fur by something or someone that wasn't him. Whatever had driven it here had driven it hard. Liam reached the hallway, feet numb with cold and fear, and crouched to press a steadying hand on Sam's head. The dog leaned into him, tail low but not tucked, eyes darting toward the dark room. "It's all right," Liam murmured, although he didn't believe it yet. "We're leaving. Slowly." He backed toward the front door, Sam glued to his knee. The leopard remained in the bedroom doorway, half shadow, half light, like a creature suspended between two worlds. It made no move to chase them, no move to retreat, just watched, judged. Liam stepped outside onto the porch, the cold air hitting him like a slap, but he didn't stop moving until he reached the far side of the yard where the trees began. Only then did he turn, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Sam nudged his leg hard, reprimanding him for getting too close to something so dangerous. Liam sank onto a fallen log, head in his hands, trying to make sense of the impossible. A snow leopard, in his cabin, in a place where none had been seen in half a generation. "Why my place?" he whispered to the trees. Sam whined, pawing at the ground. The answer came not from the forest, but from memory. A flash of a story his grandmother had once told him when he was small and scared of storms, about how some animals carried old knowledge of the mountain, how the rarest ones appeared only when something was wrong, something broken, or something sacred. Liam lifted his head. The leopard hadn't looked sick or injured beyond its healed scars. It didn't act desperate. If anything, it acted like the cabin was already its territory. The realization sank into him slowly, like cold water creeping through cloth. "It was living there," he murmured, "before I bought it." And now he had barged in, tearing down boards, claiming a space that hadn't truly been abandoned. Not by the mountain, not by the creature that had found refuge there before him. Liam stood slowly, watching the cabin. The open door yawned dark, but no light flickered behind it. No movement. Sam pressed against his leg, trembling slightly. Liam placed a steadying hand between the dog's shoulders. "We can't just leave," he said softly. "We have nowhere else." The mountain wind carried the faintest sound from inside the cabin, a heavy shift of weight, the creak of an old board. The leopard was still there, waiting, deciding. Liam exhaled and took a step toward the porch. Sam barked sharply in protest, but followed anyway, refusing to let him go alone. At the door, Liam paused and spoke into the dim interior, with a voice that trembled only once. "This place, it kept you safe, and I need it to keep me safe, too. I don't want to drive you out." Silence answered him. Thick, heavy, the kind that listens. He crouched and slid the door halfway shut, leaving a wide gap, a gesture. Not surrender, not challenge, but something in between. A boundary, an invitation. "We'll stay on the porch for now," he said softly. "You can have the inside tonight." Sam thumped his tail once, uncertain, but trusting his decision. The night settled around the cabin, the first flakes of new snow drifting down like slow, deliberate thoughts. Liam sat beside Sam on the wooden boards, pulling his thin coat tighter. Through the doorway gap, he saw the faint gleam of the leopard's eyes watching him from deep inside the dark. Not hostile, not frightened, just present, understanding in a way words couldn't reach. Hours passed like this, boy, dog, and wild ghost of the mountains, sharing the same fragile shelter without crossing each other's space. When dawn finally touched the ridge with pale gold, Liam stood, legs stiff from the cold, and looked toward the forest. The snow leopard was gone. No sound, no tracks. Nothing but the faint warmth left in the air inside the cabin, as if the mountain had breathed out once before letting go. Liam stepped over the threshold with Sam trotting beside him, scanning every corner. Empty, safe, quiet. But the cabin didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt chosen, shared. Liam rested his hand on the wall, feeling the cold timber beneath his palm. "Thank you," he whispered, unsure if the words were for the leopard or the mountain itself. Sam nudged him, tail sweeping the dusty floor. Liam looked around the small room, sunlight creeping slowly across the boards as if reclaiming the space. $5, a cabin no one wanted, and a snow leopard that shouldn't exist. Yet all of it had led him here, to a place that finally felt like the start of something instead of the end. The mountain hadn't given him a warning. It had given him a guardian, a secret, a beginning. And somewhere high among the cliffs, hidden in gray morning mist, a pair of pale eyes surely watched him with the same quiet understanding he now felt in his bones.